Okay, so this is part 2 of our sort of chips and dips combo platter piece, right? So we've got the little bowl, we've got the little plate. They're both leather hard now. We've waited about a week. We've made sure that they dried together so that they, are the same moisture level, all that good stuff. Anyway, first things first. Let's trim the big piece because really this is the centerpiece, right? This is what's most important. If you have thrown your big piece and you see that there's like a weird bump in the middle or anything happening on the inside that you do not like, then go ahead and center it right side up like this and trim anything you want from the inside. Make it flat, make it pretty, do what you need to do first here.
With worms and the whole deal?
Worms and the whole deal. I mean, you could just moisten the bottom and go slow and try and just trim it. I'm a lazy girl, but you could, yeah. But you could do worms, the whole deal, right? And then you get it and you trim it. So I don't actually need to trim anything in here, but we'll just pretend, right? So when you trim on the inside of something, it's all gonna gather in the inside. And then you're just gonna scoop it out every once in a while and put it on the side, right? But you make it nice. You get to a point where you're like, yeah, that's exactly what I was intending to make, right? And it's not always what we throw. And there's, we usually say, well, you really shouldn't have to trim the inside of anything. That should be all the thrown marks. But, we're learning and sometimes it doesn't come out perfect. So get everything out you can that you don't want from the inside. And then we're gonna start the regular trimming routine, which is first things first, we're gonna measure to see how thick the bottom is. If you have a chopstick that's big enough and can fit all the way across, then great. This one obviously does not, it sits inside. So we're gonna use another stick to act as my chopstick. This stick is not straight, but if you hold it on its side, it is. So I'm gonna hold it on the side. Yeah, if you let it go warpy, then you're not gonna get great data points. So hold it, or find one that's flat, use a different stick, whatever you want, but we're gonna hold this so that it's nice and level, and I'm not gonna move it so that it's nice and level inside and out, and then we will get a nice reading on exactly how much clay we have down there, which is about 1/4 of an inch. So this is how much clay I have left, right? So I have just 1/4 of an inch. Okay, that's a good piece of information. Now I know how deep I should be trimming that bottom, how high my foot ring will go. The next thing I need to do is decide where that foot ring goes. And you can see it's the same rules as always. We're not really changing how we trim. We look for where the floor stops being the floor. So for me, it's right about here, because just on the other side of my finger, you can see there's a curve happening. It's starting to curl up into the walls. So I'm gonna take my index finger or my middle finger, and I'm gonna flip it back and forth till I feel like they're opposite each other. And then I'm gonna take my fingernail and I'm gonna draw a line where I think that mark is, that little spot on the inside. That's gonna be the outside of my foot ring. I'm gonna have another mark about 1/4 of an inch inside of that. When I draw my full circles, that will be my foot ring. So now I know exactly how thick I am, and I know where to put my foot ring, and then I just feel these sides to see where all the weight is, how far I need to trim or not trim, right? So I've got a lot of clay right here where I always do. That's your support clay, and we're just gonna get rid of it now. Okay, a little tiny bit of water on the outer edge where your rim will be sitting. If your piece is very dry, and none of yours were, but if they were very dry, you might want to also moisten the very rim up here before you turn it over. It helps it stick, essentially. And you want it to stick a little. You'll feel it will get stickier as you kind of move it around. Use the lovely bullseye that you already have in the top of the wheel to help you kind of put it as close to on center as possible. Then you're holding your needle tool, 2 hands right in front of you at 90 degrees from the piece, and you just slowly approach until you touch some portion. Let the piece come to you. Don't force the markings, but do make more than just one marking, right? I'm going kind of up and down on this whole section where we had originally cut off that extra clay. And right now what I'm seeing is, let's see, it's hitting. It's not hitting this section, but this is the only little section it's not hitting from here to here. That might not be enough to squish it or move it. Usually it like hits a tiny bit here, and then you take the spot that is marked, that's the furthest off center, and you push it away from yourself. This might be just, like, I don't know, it got squished a little bit picking it up or something, right? So I'm actually not gonna try and center it any more than that.
So the part that doesn't have the markings goes away from you.
So the markings go towards your belly and you push away from yourself, right? Just a little bit across. These are small movements, and then you would erase those lines and you would mark it again. Interestingly enough, it doesn't look on center, but you know, when I marked the pot, it was. So it's deceiving. You should definitely be accurate, because I would have thought this was not on center, but it looks like I just left a little bit of clay when I did the cut down. So great. Saves us a lot of time. Okay, so then you have worms. You place your hand on top. Make sure as you squish the worms into the wheel, not into the pot, into the wheel, that you're not going to accidentally jump the piece off whatever you've just put it, you know, whatever center is for you right now. So hold your piece down. You're just going to squish these nice and hard right into the wheel. The excess of that clay will squish up and hold the sides. Now, if you have a very low plate, this happens with plates all the time, and you have these worms, they're going to interrupt how far down you can trim. So not to worry, we're going to focus on trimming above those worms now, and at the very end we'll take the worms off, and if there needs to be any cleanup, we'll do it while there's no worms, much slower, so that it's like not going to knock off something. All right, first things first, let's move our wheel very slowly. I'm going to hold my needle tool like a pencil, and I'm going to drop it right on top of these lines that we made for the foot ring, so I can see exactly where I need to trim. So I have lines here and here. I'm going to now trim away all this stuff in here and all the stuff up to those lines, leaving this as my foot ring. I like to use my squared off tool first. This one, you know, is the one that looks like a triangle, and I use the corner of it on the inside of my foot ring, and I just kind of press down and in just a little bit. I'm creating what I love to call a moat of safety. Just gives you a little valley here so that as you trim the inside of the center, you don't actually catch your edge of your tool and accidentally trim off part of your foot that you wanted, right? That happens a lot to all of us, right? So then the other thing is when you put your tool down and it's spinning, it's always kind of going towards the center. So if I can't start at this line, or I will trim off my foot ring, I just have to start a little bit outside that line and trim my tool, push my tool down until I hit the foot ring line. Now I have a mode of safety on either side of my foot ring. So this is what I'm going to save, and everything else is going to come away.
So can I ask you a question
Yeah,
here?
of course.
When I do this,
Yes.
okay, well maybe what you're doing now answers my question. When I do that, it doesn't look anywhere near as clean as that, and I end up with like little walls raised,
Yes.
but like really raised. And so then I end up having to basically, you know, I end up with raised
So are you?
Gook.
So you? There's two things that might be happening. You might be pushing clay more than cutting clay. It might be time for new tools.
Okay. I
Right.
like that answer.
Yeah. No, honestly, because the tool
Yeah.
should be cutting away the clay.
Yeah.
And if the tool is just pushing around the clay
Yeah.
and dispersing it somewhere
Yeah.
else,
Yeah.
then maybe it's dull,
Okay.
or maybe your clay's too soft. That's the two things that can happen.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so I've made my moat, and I've done it with a squared off tool. I'm going to switch to a loop tool, so, you know, something like this guy, but I couldn't find my littler one. So I have this one, looks like pear-shaped, but if I use this side, it's the loop tool, so I'm going to use it like this. My elbows are locked in, guys. My feet are stabilized. I can lean on my knees and be stable. My one hand always holds the top of the piece in some way and braces your trimming hand, right? Your hand isn't like free. It's got all these points. It's sort of stabilized on your legs. It's got your hand that's holding the top of the piece to push against. All these things to make your trimming tool as stable as possible as it goes across the piece. And of course you can turn your trimming tool as you want, but this piece happens to be quite flat. So after having taken away some of the clay, I can switch to using the flat side of this tool, and I can kind of even out my trimming. And keeping in mind how much clay I have down here, because we measured, and it's only about 1/4 inch, so I don't think I can go much farther than this, right? So I'm probably at the very minimum halfway of that down, or more, right? So I think I should stop. Okay. Now, I went this deep on the inside. I should be able to go equally as deep on the outside, but I'm going to curve my tool around. We know this is the side that already is curving up into the walls. So I'm going to use my tool, and I'm going to go from top to bottom. Again, two hands working together. You can see my thumb is securely stabilized against my hand that's holding down the pot. And my elbows are tucked into my hips, and so my tool is working with lots of support. And I can go as deep as I went on the inside, on the outside. So I'm looking at both those sides. I'm thinking about that curve that I touched on the side of the walls, like what kind of angles I had, and I'm mentally trying to match that. All right, I think I'm about there. Worst case scenario, guys, you don't trim enough. When you pick it up, you realize it. So you put it back on, you recenter, you trim some more. Really worst case scenario is you get really aggressive on the trimming and you trim right through the side. That, not so easy to fix. That,
That's where you put your ball.
that's where you put the ball, right? But then, of course, it's a very weak joint. So you really have to play with that. Okay, so what I have now, hopefully, is a floor that's thin enough and some walls with a curve that hopefully match. I'm going to do it just a little bit more. My gut tells me there's just a little bit less of a curve there than I'm giving it. But we'll find out if I go through. If you ever go to trim and you feel it kind of give a little bit, that's a sign that it's super thin. Just stop. It can survive super thin, totally fine, as long as it doesn't cut through. Okay. Okay, so if I feel like that's it for me, then the next thing to do is to do the finishing work. I'm going to look at this foot ring right here. I'm looking at its sharp corners and its rough top, nothing that's been touched so far. I like to use a loop tool, and I like to take just like a little kind of concave cut out of the inside edge of my foot ring. I just like the way that looks. It lightens the foot ring, but it doesn't affect the structural integrity of the support of the foot ring. And then I go around the top of it just very lightly. Of course, we don't want to take it all off. We just want to smooth it off, and then hit any corners that are needing to be softened, right? No sharp edges. People often say to me, well, when I get it out of the bisque, I can sand it. And I'm always like, no, get it clean, get it perfect now. Skip the sanding part. You should never have to sand. It should be so perfect now, like a baby's butt, that when it comes out of the bisque, it's just ready to be glazed, right? There should be no extra work for you. All these little guys that kind of re-stick, you want to get those guys off. They're just little goobers and they don't need to be on there. Last but not least, I like to take a rib of some kind and I like to dip it in some water and use it on the surface to sort of burnish down any of those throwing marks to make it really smooth. I'll use my fingers along the top and edge here as I touch the foot ring right here, to really make sure there's no sharp little bits, because that's the part that's gonna sit on the table and scratch your counters, and you might as well take the moment, it's just a moment, to make sure it's gonna be perfect. Oops, didn't mean to stick that on there. And then just clean up anything that feels bumpy. Okay, now we talked about if you really wanted to trim farther down to your rim, but you couldn't, then now's the time, once you feel like, okay, I'm done, to remove these worms carefully, not to move the piece, right? We don't wanna move the piece off center, because we need it to stay there. We just need to get these gone. So I'm gonna move them off. And then, going much slower, if you wanna do anything to sort of trim up the junction of where your trimming started and stopped, you can kind of get all the way down to the very rim, right? You might not have to, but if it's something you wanna do, then you're welcome to. Okay, so now this piece is trimmed. If it's as thin as I think it is, I don't want to just try and pick it up, because sometimes you can warp it. So I just sort of release it. You got to kind of push it across or towards you. Come on, baby. It's suctioned on. Okay, just kidding. I can't give it up.
It's because you wet the rim and the wheel.
Yes!
It is.
Oh, there it goes. Okay, so once it moves, then you can pick it up.
If you want to do anything to the rim, can you now?
Yeah, so I often take a sponge and I just sort of clean up my rim just a little bit of moisture, and then a finger to compress and to get everything kind of smooth. Okay, so, if you've ruined your little bowl and this is all you have, then at least you have a nice little plate, right? Okay, let's put the plate aside. If it's on the drier side, you're gonna want to cover it with some plastic, maybe spritz it, because you need it to be wet enough to score and slip this on. This happens to be just fine. Same thing we always do here. We're gonna use our finger to figure out where the floor is. Happens to be very narrow. Now I know we're not putting a foot ring on, but I still am gonna mark it because I need to know the curve. I need to know where the curve stops. so that I can do that appropriately. I'm gonna put a foot ring on there temporarily, and then I'm gonna slice it away. I'm gonna literally cut it off. But I need the foot ring on there because I wanna see how deep I've gone on the bottom. So we're gonna do the same thing we always do. We're gonna measure the, how deep we have it at a deepest spot. So 1 chopstick over, mark the vertical chopstick on the horizontal, both inside and outside. So this one also has about a 1/2 inch of clay right there that we can cut away. This piece is little quote unquote foot ring, if it was there, is marked, and I can feel the size to see how much clay to trim away, what the curve is like. Put it upside down. Let's center it the same way. These little guys can be finicky to center because there's not much space to move them. They're just teeny tiny little things. So the amount of like distance you move them is always really small. And this is still a little bit off. Let's see if I can get it on there. It's so close. So I'm looking at where the marks are. I'm finding the 2 ends of the mark so I can put my thumb directly in the center of that line and then push away just the tiniest bit, erase those marks, and go back to making more. It's still just a little off. So ends of the marks, push away just a smidge, erase the marks. Really subtle changes in distance here. These marks are still marking the same side that they were before, which means I'm not pushing far enough, but they're getting longer, which means I'm getting closer. So hopefully I don't push it too far. All right, now I feel like I'm hitting on both sides maybe. Let's see. Nope, not quite. Now I'm too far. The game of putting things on center. Oh, there it is. Okay, I'm marking all the way around evenly without having to try. That's the key. Everyone can make a mark all the way around. If you jam your tool into it. Not trying to make a mark is very good. All right. Last one here. I am going to start by making that foot ring mark all the way around. Okay. And I'm going to make the foot ring mark on the inside, even though I know we don't need it. We're not going to have a foot on this, but I know that I have a 1/2 inch to play with down there, and I have a 1/2 inch on the outside of this to play with. So I'm going to set how deep I want right now. Okay?
So those circles that you made are
They're just showing
of
me
an inch or something. They show you how
deep I've
Yeah.
gone from the original distance, right? From the original spot, which is
It's a
here.
temporary foot ring.
Temporary foot ring, right? Now I'm going to use my loop tool, and I'm just going to carve away that curve that I know I needed to get all this weight off this piece. Notice that even though my tool is further away from my hand because I'm holding it in the center, I'm still supporting it with my thumb or the base of my thumb. So no matter how you want to hold this, just make sure it's supported. It's never flying by itself over here, right? It's always got something to press against. All right, so that is the curve that I want. That is the depth that I want. Now I can cut it all off, right? But you don't want to do it until you're like, right, I know exactly what I'm doing and how far I'm going, so you don't end up accidentally leaving too much clay on that bottom. Right, so here we're gonna just cut that low, cut it right off. And then I'm keeping it sort of like a little flat area, so that if it does end up being something that sits on its own, it has a little flat space. That's it for the little guy. So then we're gonna combine them, which is sort of the fun, creative part. A little bit of smoothing. And then we're gonna take this off and hopefully, fingers crossed, it's just fine. Oh yeah, it's so cute. Okay, so now we've got these two pieces and we get to make the creative decisions we want on how to put them together and what to do with them, right? So I've got this piece, the big one, and this piece here, the small one. One option we have, right, is to take our X-Acto knife and sort of trace what we think is the shape and the size of what we need. start smaller than what you think. And then what you're gonna do is keep whittling away at that clay. If the piece is inside or outside a little bit, you're gonna have to angle those walls so that you have a flush connection, right, with wherever you end up putting. So it could hang just a little bit on the inside, just a little bit on the outside. It could be whatever you want. You could cut this all the way down through the bottom and up, so this piece actually sits on the table and just notches in, right? And it could sit just with a little valley so that it mimics the shape here, and it just is like a bird bath. It sits on top a little bit, but set in just a little, right? You need something to secure it, right? Something to hold it on. We had thought, I don't know if Mariah's here. Mariah.
Want me to get it?
Yeah, go get Mariah. She had really wanted to see what would happen if we bend these a little bit.
Me.
Okay. I'm moistening the walls a little bit because if we're going to cut and try and bend them, they are leather hard and they're a little bit late leather hard, and I'm a little concerned that if I cut and bend them, they're going to crack off. So it's a risk. Just how I fly. All right, so we're gonna see what happens. I had a thought that if we could do a little bending, it might be kind of cool, maybe. So I'm gonna take my X-Acto and I'm gonna cut through the wall at an angle, sort of a long
That is scary.
angle down. Everybody's shaking in their boots. Okay, and then I can take that angle in, right? So I've cut all of this angle. And the idea is that the angle hugs, it's like a friend.
Yes, it's a little
friend
Get
here.
some around it.
So,
That's pretty.
right,
Yeah, yeah.
so that angle gets cut. And then what's been cut over here needs to be dealt with, right? You can't just leave a gross cut edge here. That's no. So let's talk about this edge before we add anything permanently, because we need to really soften this edge up to make it look like it was one of these throwing edges. So I'm gonna pull this guy kind of to its max. I'll probably be unwrapping it a little bit too. And as I said, I wet this first because it is leather hard. It's luckily not late leather hard. It's sort of just perfectly leather hard. And I was able to wet it enough, and it does absorb that water because it rehydrates it a little bit so that you can then ask it to do kooky things like this. But leaving these sharp edges here is really a no-no. We can't have that. Not at the clay school. We teach you all to be fine craftsmen. So I am going around with my fingers and I'm sort of blending this thrown area into this cut area, working down any sharp corners or any weird folds that I see in the clay. So do you see how it's like, it's softened it, right? Softened it right down, so now you no longer have any kind of sharp edges. And then I can move this back out a little bit so that it sits there. And then decide how it's gonna hold this guy, right? So the bottom edge here also is a cut edge. You don't see it as much, so I guess I'm not as concerned about it. But I do want to score this not only to the arm, but down here, okay? So I've got my scoring tool. You love this,
Are
Kathy?
you kidding me? I love it.
It's terrific.
Okay, so here's my score marks, right? So I'm gonna score. And I'm not exact, I can kind of see where an impression was made there, but not wholly. So, I should have my paintbrush. Do you have my paintbrush? This is nice.
Did you say not soften the edges on the bottom of that tool?
I did a little bit, but I don't have to a
Okay.
lot. You don't see it a lot, and
Okay.
it's really fine. I like to add water and score, and then add more water. It's just a really great way to get these things to sort of work with each other. And then I kind of place it where I think I want it. Then I remove it, and what happens is, of course, it leaves that gooky spot, and it shows you exactly where in here you're going to need to add copious amounts of scoring. But it also allows you not to over-score anything. So you score it, whoop-ah, thank you, and then you put it right, a little bit of water right on your score marks. Then you score it again, right? Boop, 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 boop. Now you have two scored pieces. If this got smushed, if the score marks when you press them together got smushed, then go ahead and reopen them. This one was fine. I'm gonna hold my fingers under the spot where I'll be attaching this, and then I'm gonna gently press and wiggle, 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 right? Wiggle, 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 right? That's how you get it. So your fingers are underneath there, pressing up, your hands pressing down, and that's how you get a nice secure thing. You get a wiggle, wiggle.
You have to say that.
Wait, you have to say it just like that. Well, now you won't forget. You guys will all be like, oh wait, did I wiggle, wiggle, wiggle? And then you'll be like, okay. So now I've got this part. Now this will detach, and maybe that's what you like. Or maybe you attach it just in one spot. I mean, you could do it in any number of ways, right? If you aesthetically like there to be a gap there, if you wanted to hold on a little bit tighter, which would be structurally more sound. I'm gonna score the inside like 1.5 inches here, and I'm gonna score the outside 1.5 inches here, right? Do the same thing with the water. You're gonna paint the water on both sides, and then you're gonna rescore both sides. So there we go, we got this, and we're gonna rescore a little bit now that the water's on there, just to open up all of those little marks. Okay, and now I'm gonna take it and I'm gonna hug the wall. You should see a little bit of that water squeezing out. I don't actually want it to be so sealed together that you can't tell it's two parts. I kind of like that it
You want to see
shows.
the seam.
Yeah, you want to see the seam. You want to see the seam. Okay, so and then I'm going to use my finger on the bottom edge. Make sure that's really soft. Remember that was our sharp cut edge? And I want to go along that edge, make sure it's lovely. And squish these together both inside and out so they really look beautiful. If you need to take a dry paintbrush, and you have your dry paintbrush here, you can go over these seams with a dry paintbrush. That's a great way to sort of like seal it together. Or you can use one of those cleanup tools that we have over in the rubber tipped ones. You could use a dull pencil, any of these things to sort of compress this seam between the two areas.
No, wrong. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Again, on 60 days.
I know, it's
Good,
handy.
I know,
I'm
yeah.
gonna call you more often. Oh yeah. So for the rubber tip guys are really great for getting into the seam to sort of compress it but not lose it. Does that make sense? So we sort of have it there, and it's reinforced. Okay. Then now that you've got it together, now you can absolutely, if you want, you don't have to, of course, start adding your frogs and your stems and your leaves, right? No, think about it. Don't poo-poo it yet. Don't poo-poo it yet. But look, think if you had like a nice
Put a bird
long
on it.
coil, right? Say you had a nice long coil, and then you let it have sort of like one of those like, whoop, right? Now we've got stems happening, right? So then you could have something like that, right?
Yeah.
Come on. All right, I'm saying you could be a little creative, right? Ooh, all right, let's show the camera. Ooh, oh. All right, so these are all options. Animals, frogs, taking your carving tools, adding all the veins to say a lily pad, whatever you feel like it is.
You know, it's the shape.
The shape is lovely. Maybe you don't have any. Kathy's like, don't ruin it. Anyway, so this is where you could end up. It's one of the many options you have to put these pieces together. They can all look very different if you want, or you can copy this. Anything you want to do is just fine. Before you bend it though, do moisten it, because you'll just crack it off. In which case then you choose a different way to add your beautiful bowl to your thing, right? So this is gonna be, let's let the lemons become lemonade in some way. But anyway, this is generally where you're at. Oh, I didn't say anything about joining down the bottom, but if you have any gook that comes out of the bottom or extra sort of lines, get in there with one of your cleanup tools, a brush, one of these rubber tip tools, and really just blend that seam together, right? Seams are where things are gonna crack, if it's gonna crack. All right, and then because you've added two things together, you do need to cover this over and let it dry slowly under plastic for the week. And next week, definitely put it over the shelf. Don't forget your name on the bottom, and you should be.
You should put your name on the bottom before you do all that joining stuff, right? Because you don't really want to put it upside down.
I mean, it's pretty good. You know when you get recently I, for the first time, went to Dairy Queen and got a Blizzard, and they came over and they're like, here's your Blizzard, and they give it to you, and I was like, why did you do that? And they said it's their like slogan, if they don't, you get a free Blizzard.
Really?
Now I know.
Down to show you how thick it is.
They shake it upside down with the spoon in it and everything, and then they go, here's your Blizzard. They do it for every single one. And you're like, why are you doing that? So anyway, there's your Blizzard test.
Nice.
To make sure your cup's attached properly. Okay, that's it.
It is lovely.